welcome to Revival Fire Online. This is Apostle Marsha Pedro saying, welcome. Why don't you go ahead and like and share this broadcast? Why don't you go ahead if you are on Facebook, you can go ahead and tell someone, hey, share, like, tag someone, say Apostle Marsha is live on Revival Fire this evening and she has a word for you. If you are on YouTube, why don't you go ahead and subscribe to our channel and press that notification button, because we put out new content every single week. This message, this broadcast, I want to share with you what God is saying for this season, what God is saying to the body of Christ, and most importantly, what God is saying to you and your household and your heart. I want to speak to you about the role of your tongue. Yes, your tongue, your speech, your words in the next season. Because as I was standing outside a little while ago, I realized, hey, we have almost come to the end of 6 months of this year. We are going to come to the end of April, and we are going to enter yet another transitionary period. In the Caribbean, we have changed seasons. In different countries, we different time zones, different climates, seasons will change, but chronologically things have shifted, and I really sense that this season again is about to shift. And I know those of us who are part of my church and my congregation, Revival Fire Apostolic Center, we have experience a real shift, and we are walking it out right now. And one of the things that are key in any new season and any transitional leader, whether it's spiritual, whether it's in a secular world, whether it's wherever, they will tell you that you need to be prepared, you need to have strategy, and you need to know the tools and resources that are available and necessary. Yes, available and necessary, because in some seasons you have tools that are available but they are not necessary, and then we have some tools that are necessary but not available. And I am here this evening to teach you, to bring a word from God about the tool of your tongue, the role and function, the role of your tongue in this next season. You see, the Lord is good. That is absolute. The Lord is good. The Lord is gracious. The Lord is kind, and He desires that you have successful lives and grow in wisdom. He desires that. I want you to understand that the whatever pressures you're facing or whatever, it's just temporary. But amidst everything, despite your choices, despite whatever, He wants you to be successful, and He wants you to grow in wisdom. I have sat and observed that we tend to be a self-sabotaging people. Many times we tend to be a self-sabotaging people. We all complain when things don't go our way, yet we ourselves are the ones who mess things up and then grumble at the negative outcomes. We eat the wrong things, we get sick, we grumble. We make the wrong choices, we get into debt, we get into whatever, we grumble. So we tend to be self-sabotaging, and God wants us to do some things differently. God wants to break that cycle of self-sabotage that we have been using our tongues, our words, our voice to inflict upon our lives. And in this season, He does not want us to go through a cycle. And I believe I have a message out there somewhere on YouTube, breaking the cycle and stepping into a season. He doesn't want us to continue this cycle of self-sabotage, but He wants us to step into this new season and use the thing that He has given us, our tongues, our voices, our words, as a tool and as a weapon. You see, as we embark on a new season in the church, in the nation, in our individual lives, as we embark on a new season, there are some things that we need to do differently. Yeah, there are some things we need to do differently. The use of our tongue is one of these things. It is the heart of God today that we are educated and equipped to maneuver through the next season of our life. the book of James gives a very effective summary of the potency of the tongue, and I encourage each person to read the book of James chapter 3, and to read to your children, teach your children. James chapter 3 verse 3. I'm just going to read some of it for you. And the book of James speaks about the tongue. When we put bits into the mouths of horses to make them obey us, we can turn the whole animal. Again, we put bits in the mouth. So the author, James, the half brother of Jesus, is saying we put bits in the mouths of horses to make them obey us. So we subdue their tongues. Or take ships as an example. Although they are so large and are driven by strong winds, they are steered by a very small rudder wherever the pilot wants to go. So he's saying a ship is huge. It's gigantic. If you really look at a ship, if you look at cruise ships, and if you go on and you look at ships, they are so huge. And it takes a very small thing called a rudder to change the direction of the ship. It causes the rudder is able to move the entire thing in whatever medium it is, whether it's water or even if it's a plane, if it's in the air, moving the rudder, which is the small thing, it can change. Likewise, the tongue is a small part of the body, but it makes great boasts. The tongue also, consider what a great forest is set on fire by a small spark. The tongue also is a fire, a world of evil among the parts of the body. It corrupts the whole body, sets the whole course of one's life on fire, and itself set on fire by hell. You see, the book of James is often referred to as the New Testament book of Proverbs. James really wanted, and James was really interested in those Christians, the Jewish Christians, the Jews. He understood that there were others to be saved, but his assignment was to the Jews, and he wanted to make sure that they were living their lives right. And this is my assignment today. He wanted them to be effective in their faith and effective in their demonstration of their Christianity, and he wanted them to be successful. James really wanted to guide the believer towards ethical living. And this is my assignment this evening, and this is my assignment on this broadcast, so that I will guide you into that path. I will guide you, and I will give you the tools and the strategy for the next season, so that your tongue is used most effectively. You see, James always emphasized something. He always emphasized that inward faith must be demonstrated by outward action. And again, my theme, we're speaking about the tongue, the role of the tongue in the next season. How is the tongue going to be used in the next season? In verse 4, the power of the tongue is likened unto the tiny part of a ship called the rudder. The rudder is a tiny part, but very powerful. It is used to change the course of a ship or plane in whichever medium it is operating. The rudder, that's the tongue. That's your tongue in your mouth. You see, in this season, my brother and my sister, the Lord wants your tongue to pull down some things that you could not handle in the natural, and to establish some things that you could not fathom in the spiritual realm. This is what God is saying. He wants you to use your tongue, and as I speak to you, I literally feel my tongue moving. I'm so conscious of it, and the potency of the words that I'm speaking, and the instructions that I'm giving, that before I tell you how your tongue will be used as a weapon and a tool in the next season, before I tell you this, I want to first warn you of the misuse of the tongue, because I've seen many people use their words in two ways: callously and carelessly. I always say this. I always tell people your tongue is an instrument of influence, and you need to be responsible with your influence. I tell people, yes, I know I walk in the office of the prophet, so I'm very guarded with my words. And I personally am experiencing a season in my life that I want to share with you where I'm understanding and I have a heightened awareness. And even right now, those of you who have that prophetic gifting, who call to the who operate in a prophetic anointing, who are even called to the office of the prophet, and who exercise those giftings, I'm decreeing and I'm declaring that for the next season you will have a heightened awareness, and you will have an understanding of the responsibility of your influence as a prophetic voice. And as I said, I myself, I have a heightened awareness and a responsibility, and an understanding that my words cannot be used in two ways: callously to bring to bring hurt, and uselessly and carelessly to just say any old thing. Listen, we are not in a time when our tongues can be used to just have idle conversation. No, our minds cannot have idle thoughts. We need to harness our minds. Listen, if I'm driving on the road and my body has my hand has an idle movement, and I just swing right on a one-way street, or I just swing in a direction that would collide with another vehicle. We cannot have idle movement, we cannot have idle actions, we cannot have idle thoughts, and we cannot have idle words in this season. Okay, so let me tell you. So we are speaking about your tongue, the use of your tongue in this next season. And it's very strategic. So let me tell you the things that you should not use your tongue to do. And I know many of us have made errors in our ignorance. I've made errors in my immaturity growing up as a Christian, and you know what, I'm still here. I can ask for forgiveness. There's only one sin that cannot be pardoned, but I can ask for forgiveness for the other things that I've said and done, and I can learn, and we have a responsibility to learn. First thing, do not use your tongue against God's order and authority. One of the things that you do not use your tongue against God's order and authority. Numbers 16:3, and I will read as much and explain as much in the scriptures as I can, but you need to get into the word. You need to get into the animated action of the word. The word is so alive. It's so exciting. It's so encouraging. Number 16:3, they came as a group to oppose Moses and Aaron and said to them, "You have gone too far." They came to oppose. This is Korah and the guys. I say Korah and the guys, okay, because we have many operating that same spirit of Korah in the church, in the nation, everywhere now. And they said, "You've gone too far. The whole community is holy, every one of them, and the Lord is with them. Why then do you set yourself above the Lord's assembly?" This is what they used: their words, they used their tongue against God's order and authority. That's what they did. Do not use your tongue. You see, Jehovah had set Moses over the children of Israel. Korah decided that he would use his tongue as a tool to express his perceived disadvantage with the leadership of the people. Your tongue is a mode of influence. I always remind people to be responsible with their influence, especially the use of their tongue. As James says, the tongue is a small member, but it can ignite a large fire. Korah's misuse of his tongue caused his death. And I mean, when you read this, you would understand it's 250 men, but not just the men died. The men, their friends, their children, the earth literally opened up. We look at movies and we see the earth opening up. This is the Bible. The Bible says the earth literally opened up and devoured them. Korah's misuse of his tongue caused the death of all, and the death of all those associated with him. So do not use your tongue against God's order and authority. Listen, it includes every governmental authority. God said, I have put leaders in place. I've put my governments, not just church government, government of nations, companies, your supervisor, your do not use your tongue against God's order and authority. In this season, God is not going to deal with that lightly. Another misuse of the tongue, something we need to be careful of in this season. Do not use your tongue to speak against your prophetic words. Do not use your tongue to speak against your prophetic words. Luke 1:11. As I said, I will go through as much of the scriptures as I can, but it's a long account. Then the angel of the Lord appeared to him. This is Zechariah, standing at the right side of the altar of incense. So this is the angel of the Lord appearing to him in the holy place. When Zechariah saw him, he was startled and was gripped with fear. But the angel said to him, do not be afraid, Zechariah. Your prayer has been heard. Your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you are to call him John. This is the announcement of the birthing of the conception and birthing of John the Baptist. And, the angel of the Lord goes on to say all the wonderful, great things that John will do and, what he will do in the world and, that kind of thing and how you're to raise him up. He goes on to give him an entire strategy. And some of us, we get our prophetic words and God gives you a strategy. And instead of listening to the strategy, we become fearful like Zechariah. And he says, the angel of the Lord goes on to say he will bring back many of the people of Israel to the Lord their God. And in verse 18, Zechariah asked the angel, and this is it, he used his tongue. How can I be sure of this? I am an old man and my wife is well along in years. He used his tongue to speak against his prophetic word. The angel said to him, I am Gabriel. I stand in the presence of God, and I have been sent to speak to you and to tell you this good news. And now you will be silent. So the angel of the Lord rebuked him, Zechariah could not speak. He could not speak for the duration of the gestational period. The messenger of God came to Zechariah to give him the good news of the birth of his son. However, the man was so much gripped by fear and doubt that he expressed negative sentiments. Many have spoken, many of us have spoken, many believers, many children of who God has created, children of the Most High God. We have spoken ourselves out of our blessing. Our tongues must never be used to disagree with or curse our prophetic destinies. I want to repeat that. Our tongues must never be used to disagree with or curse our prophetic destinies. In his graciousness and mercy, God saved Zechariah. He has done the same for us many times before. Let us not take this for granted and start speaking as those who do not believe. Let us not take it for granted. So we do not curse, we do not disagree, we do not speak with our prophetic words. We do not use our tongues to speak against our prophetic words. Another thing, do not use your tongue to instill fear in others. I've seen many people do this. In 1 Kings, verse 19, chapter 1, again, we have the account of Elijah. We have the account with Elijah and Jezebel. Now Ahab told Jezebel everything Elijah had done and how he had killed all the prophets with the sword. He told them everything that he had done. He had killed the prophets with the sword. So Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah. Jezebel used her tongue and to Elijah to say, may the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely, if by this time tomorrow I do not make your life like that of one of them. Elijah was afraid and ran for his life. When he came to Beersheba in Judah, he left his servant there, while he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness. He came to a broom bush, sat down under it, and prayed that he might die. that he might die. I've had enough, Lord. He said, take my life. I am no better than my ancestors. He lay down under the bush and fell asleep. And we understand this story. We understand Elijah had his victories. He had his Mount Carmel. He said, bring down your fire. I'll bring down. He spoke the words to end the drought. He had his victory, demonstrated the kingdom. But when Jezebel heard of the demonstration of authority, she immediately sought to intimidate Elijah with her tongue. If we really think about it, Jezebel would be a modern day bully. If we really think about it. We speak against bullying in the road, on the roads. I personally know women have told me, people have told me, Marsha, you do not need to you need to drive a big vehicle, because people tend to want to bully you on the streets when you're driving a smaller vehicle. That's what they say. I don't know. I've only driven for a short time a biggish vehicle. But I don't know if they're going to do that. But that spirit that Elijah had to be scared and run away, that's not going to come upon me. No. Jezebel is not going to intimidate me. But I want to tell you, Jezebel is a modern day bully. Do not succumb to that spirit. It only brings this destruction. And those people who use their tongues to intimidate others and to bring fear are really those who are hurt. Those who are hurt and those who are hurting. I remember many years ago in my life, when I worked in the corporate world, I did a job that looked over the transactions of other people. So you did your transaction, you did your document, and after your document was completed, the next day I would take the document and I will ensure the accuracy. And I remember quite clearly, I was in an unhealed state. And when I would look at the documents, when I would look at the transactions, I would do it to ensure that that I will find your errors, and I would find your errors. I would come to you and say, hey, you made these errors, and because I did the job to find the errors. I did the job basically to find everything that you were doing wrong. But then I remembered, for a season, God took me and he healed me. He transformed me. And I continued doing the same job. But do you know what? The motive of that job changed. I changed from doing the job to find another person's errors to doing the job to cover another person's risk. So one in an unhealed state, I went to look for your errors, and I went to look for you, and I would write with a reading pen for many years, and but when I got healed and when I got transformed, I said, hey, I do not want this person to be exposed to fraud. I don't want this person to have to face the repercussions of this error. And I did it to cover people. And I did it to close up the gaps. So how are you using your tongue? How are you using your position? How are you using your authority in this season? Are you like Jezebel? Are you using your gifting, or are you using your tongue to instill fear in others? I encourage you, get healed, get transformed, get delivered, and use your tongue in a positive manner. So now I'm going to share with you very quickly, but very clearly, what God intends that we should do in this next season. And he wants us to use our tongues in this next season. And how will we do it? We will use our tongues to speak forth God's established order and judgment. We will use our tongues to speak forth God's established order and judgment. You see, for many seasons, we've been intimidated to speak forth God's established order and judgment. And because of that, just like a garden that grows with many weeds, our country, our minds, our churches. There have been many things that have been allowed to grow up, the wheat and the tares. But I really believe in this season, God is saying, I am going to raise up those men and women who will use their tongue to establish God's order and judgment. And again, I want to read again the flip side. Korah spoke and he accused Moses, okay? But here's what Moses said in Exodus chapter 16, verse 4. When Moses heard what Korah said, he bowed to the ground. He said to Korah and to all who were with him, so he employed the use of his tongue, right? He said to Korah and all that were with him, tomorrow morning the Lord will show who is his and who is holy. He will have him come near to him. He will bring near to himself the one whom he will choose. In this season, you need to understand God's righteousness and be a manifestation of that. We are the righteousness of Christ. We need to understand God's righteousness and be a manifestation of it. Kingdom will only be established with righteousness. This kingdom that will not pass away, it will only be established with righteousness. God's righteousness must be manifested in your life and your language. Remember what James wanted to do. The writer of the book of James, the Apostle James, remember what he wanted to do? He wanted us to speak forth, to live forth the faith that we believed. He wanted to cultivate and to maintain ethical behavior in this society. Kingdom will only be established in righteousness. God's righteousness must be manifested in your life and your language. Moses had the moral authority to speak forth order because his life was righteous. Not only will your tongue be used to speak order, but it will be used to speak judgment. And that is important, my brother, my sister. And when I say that, when I say judgment, I honestly don't say it with much pride or with much strength, but I say it with much holy fear. Because being used as a vessel of God's judgment or as an oracle to speak forth God's judgment and his words of righteousness on the earth against disorder is a very powerful thing, but it's a very sacred thing. In the last season, many spoke order, but not judgment, and that is important. There is generally an acceleration in the spirit realm, and the things that God has allowed in the past will no longer be tolerated. The chorus in the camp must be annihilated if we are to see the promise. So the first thing that we're going to use our tongues to do in this season, to speak forth God's established order and judgment. If you feel a prompting from the Lord, if you feel God is saying, hey, I want you to speak forth this thing. And listen, it's not about being aggressive and it's not about, breaking down a person. You need to understand the heart of God. But there comes a time when God says enough is enough, and I'm going to speak forth my judgment, and I'm going to speak forth my order. My order must be established. So there may be things that you would see in your neighborhood, and God would say it's enough. That establishment must come down, and you go and you speak into the atmosphere all unrighteous behavior, all occultic activities, or whatever God would have you speak. You go and you speak God's judgment in the atmosphere. So he's calling to us to use our tongues to speak forth established order and judgment. The other thing that God is going to use our tongues. Our tongues, we need to position ourselves and understand. We need to speak with wisdom and discern the hearts of men in this season. Our tongues will be used with words of wisdom and the ability to discern the hearts of men. Luke 9:18, and I sat and I said, wow, God, you really are amazing. Luke 9:18. Once Jesus was praying praying in private, and his disciples were with him, he asked them, "Who do the crowd say that I am?" So Jesus is asking his disciples, who do the crowd say I am? They replied, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others that one of the prophets of long ago has come back to life." And then he said, "But what about you?" He asked, "Who do you say I am?" And Peter answered, "God's Messiah." You see, God is going to use your tongue in this season to speak with wisdom and understand the hearts of men. It was never the desire of the Lord that we were confused or misled by the wrong people in our circles. It was never. It was never the desire of God. Some of us have had to endure grueling people experiences, and some of us have matured along the way, while others became disenchanted with the words of men and aborted their prophetic destiny, unfortunately. In this season, your tongue will be used as a tool of wisdom to unveil hidden things. You will ask the right questions. Do you understand now why I said at the beginning we need to guard our tongues? We cannot speak carelessly or callously. We cannot speak carelessly or callously. You see, your tongues will be used as a tool of wisdom to unveil hidden things. You see, we have walked with people who we thought held us in high esteem and close confidentiality. In the last season, we depended on our emotions and how we felt around those people. In this season, God is using our tongue to filter the faithful from the faithless. You see, Jesus is recruiting an army of ambassadors. An army of ambassadors. They needed to know that he was the Messiah. Your tongue will be used to unveil the motives and minds of men. Just remember, let your motive be pure and submit your tongue to God. So in this season, God is going to take that tongue, and I love it when he takes the tongue of the unwise and the unlearned and the regular person, but he also takes the tongue of the wise and the learned, and he changes the language, and he changes the concept, and he changes the strategy, and we all become one in his hand, and he uses our tongues with and our speech with such wisdom that brings out the hearts of men. And God is going to use our tongues in this season to unveil the motives and the minds of men. Another thing God is going to use our tongues to do in this season, to activate a new season and set a clear path. When I tell you each of these, I hope you're remembering or you're taking notes, because I want you to use these literally as tools. Every time I say something, it should be used as a tool. Hey, or an ingredient for your next season, for the dish of your next season. It should be used. And when I say to activate a new season, you should say, "Hey, here's a machete. Hey, this is a Uzi." I don't know about it. Or, "Hey, here's an easel. Yeah, hey, here's a paintbrush," because I'm going to use these tools and these things for my next season. So God is going to use your tongue to activate a new season and set a clear path. 2 Kings chapter 2 verse 13. And again, our dear prophetic brothers Elisha and Elijah. Elisha then picked up Elijah's cloak that had fallen from him, and went back and stood at the bank of the Jordan. He took the cloak that had fallen from Elijah and struck the water with it. And what did he do? He used his tongue. He said, "Where now is the Lord, the God of Elijah?" he asked. When he struck the water, it divided to the right and to the left, and then he crossed over. So he struck the water, and then he spoke. In the next season, your voice will be used to summon the next move of God. In the next season, your voice will be used to summon, your tongue will be used to summon the next move of God. In the book of Apostle Jane Hammond has a wonderful book. The name of it is Declarations for Breakthrough, and she takes you through different practices. She shares her dreams. She shares prophetic seasons. She says the importance of words. She shares cultural things about words. She shares so many things, and at the end of each chapter, she coins. She has given declarations that you speak forth. And you shift things, you see things happen. I highly recommend that book, Declarations for Breakthrough, and it's by Apostle Jane Hammond. She takes us through a journey of understanding the importance of words, and that's also important. She gives declarations at the end of each chapter and activates the voice to speak forth in the spirit. You see, some of us have been following. Are there any ones who have been following? You've been following your Elijah. You've been following your Elijah. They've said during COVID-19, don't go to that church. Don't follow Elijah. The will is going to come to an end. He could not have predicted it. They've said, don't submit to your boss. He's risking your life. You're going out to work, Don't risk your life. Stay at home. But you followed. Some of us have been diligently waiting through the storms. We've been waiting through and we've been waiting through everything. The mantle has dropped, and God is just waiting for your tongues to utter the command. Elisha needed to establish his authority in the earth, because those are the sons of the prophets who were looking at him. He needed to establish his authority in the earth, but he also needed to access that frequency in the spirit realm, his tongue. Your tongue is going to activate the new season and set a clear path for you. Your tongue, and my final point on what your tongue can do, and there are so many more things that your tongue will do, and I know I will share as I continue my broadcast, because I really sense your tongue is going to be used, your voice, your tongue, your words is going to be used very powerfully in this next season. And the final thing, God is going to use your tongue to bring you before kings. And we have a favorite, one of a great romance, or great love stories of the Bible, Queen Esther. Well, one of those that I like, at least. Queen Esther chapter 5, verse 3. Then the king asked, "What is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom I'll give you. It will be given to you." And this is what she said, and quite wisely, this is what she said. "If it pleases the king," replied Esther, "let the king, together with Haman, come today to a banquet I have prepared for him." "Bring Haman at once," said the king, "so that we may do what Esther asked." Your voice, your tongue in this season will bring you before kings. She could have asked for anything. She could have asked for all the wonderful perfumes. I can think of so many names. I will say none on air. She could have asked for so many sneakers. I can think of many that I would love. She could have asked for so many handbags, vehicles, lands, stocks and shares. She could have asked for so many things. And he was going to give up to half the kingdom. But what did she ask? She asked for an audience with the king. She asked for an audience with the king. Many of us have been preparing for our entire Christian lives, for the things that we are about to embark on in this next season, my brother, my sister. Esther was sent by God to the palace and was preparing for this one encounter. This was the encounter that would save her people. When you are before the king, your tongue must employ wisdom and diplomacy. Your tongue, with the words you use, can curse a nation or free a generation. Your tongue will also reflect the passion of your heart. Remember, Esther said that she's going to see her king, and if she perishes, then so she will perish. She was determined to accomplish her assignment. I just want to share two final things with you. So I shared with you what the tool God wants to use in this season. He wants to use your tongue. I shared with you why you what you should not use your tongue to do in this season, and I shared with you how God is going to use your tongue in this season. But two things I want you to employ in this season when you're using your tongue. I want you to employ, I want you to be discreet, and I want you to be confidential. I told someone that, and I said, listen to me. In this season, you are about to ascend, and I really sense it among. I sense it in the atmosphere, and I sense it especially to those who operate in that prophetic anointing. You're about to ascend to a place of authority in God, because God is about establishing His kingdom, but He wants you to do it, yes, with tact and diplomacy, but He wants you to do it with confidentiality. He wants you to do it with confidentiality, and He wants you to do it discreetly. And two people I remembered. Esther understood things about Haman, but she did not go blurting it out. And those who can keep the secrets of the king are those who will be assigned to execute the orders of the king. And go read Tommy Tenney's One Night with the King. It's a wonderful, again, a lovely romance story of Esther. One Night with the King, Tommy Tenney. I believe there's a movie, I'm not sure. But those who can keep the secrets of the king are those who will be assigned to execute the assignment of the king. So you need to do things with confidentiality. You need to do things with and you need to do things with discreetly. And I remember quite clearly, those who can do things discreetly are those who will be called to lead publicly. If you can accomplish the assignment of the king discreetly, if you can do things in quietness, like Nehemiah. Remember when Nehemiah went into the city, he stayed there 3 days, and he surveyed in silence. I believe I have something about that on YouTube about Nehemiah and building and praising. But what he did, he surveyed in silence. When you need to understand, in this season, it's a time when we need to do things discreetly. Nehemiah went out in the night time, and he did not go with his entourage, because remember, Nehemiah came with decree from the king. He came with authorization from the king, and he came with resources from the king. But what did he do? He went out in the night time, and he surveyed in silence. He did his work discreetly. If you are able to employ discretion and confidentiality in this season, you will be one of those who will be used to establish the kingdom of righteousness, establish the orders of the king in this season. So I just want to encourage you, understand the new season we're about to step in. We finish half of the year, so it's time to just polish up, because in July something new is going to happen again. Something new is going to start again. We need to be in line. We need to be in place. We need to be in our lane. We need to wait our turn. We need to be activated. We need to have the right tools and resources, and we need to understand the use of our tongue in this season. Until my next broadcast, until my next video, this is Apostle Marsha Pedro saying, live a life of passion. Live a life in pursuit of Him.